Good morning and welcome to DAPR 300R, the audio industry. Today we have a special guest with us, a UVU alumni, Miles Fulwider. You are out in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and you are living your best life. I know from watching you on the internet, running around the country, always having a ton of fun, always working on some of the coolest projects. And welcome back to UVU via the internet, and thanks for taking some time out of your day to participate with us.
Happy to do it. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so let's take an informal journey of your life from student at UVU to where you're at now. Like, how did you get to where you're at now? What's your title, and what was the journey that got you to where you're at now?
What is my title now?
You got a lot, I know. It's an unfair question.
We'll get to that, I suppose. My time at UVU was awesome. I originally started at UVU in computer science. I have a bit of a background there. Was actually almost pretty close to completing a computer science degree. I started working in IT and developing programming and stuff like that kind of early. I started working in support in IT around the age of 15 or so. And so that was just kind of a natural progression. Was nearly completed with a computer science degree and had a crisis of faith um, about that. And was like, I don't want to do this. And I had actually taken after I can't recall if I had taken, no, I hadn't taken an audio class yet. I had taken at the time, I almost want to say, was it a MIDI class? I can't remember. I was taught in the music school.
With
Uh,
Dr. Pond.
yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
I remember.
So I did that. But my background is I'm a musician. So I'm a classically trained violinist, but also a guitarist, and I've played in a lot of bands and orchestras and toured the world in a variety of formats and functions in that capacity. And so it was always something that I was very passionate about and interested in. It was always part of my life, but I never anticipated like making that full stop. And so computers and technology and all that is how I got into this. And so where some people, I think, get into this from electrical engineering background or those types of avenues, that wasn't how I did it. Yeah, I just woke up one day. I was like, I don't want to do this, the exclusive computer thing. And so I had a conversation with my wife. We were newly married at that time. And then deep down, I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to necessarily fully fess up to that at that point. Where it's that idea, she is a musician as well. And we had actually met in an orchestra, but it was one of those things where just to say like, let's not, this idea of stability and security, let's go rogue and do something completely not that. But that was the conversation we had. And I remember I didn't really say what I wanted to do, but she could tell I was kind of burned out on the other. And she's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to do recording? And I was like, heck yeah, I do. And from that point, it was like full speed ahead, never look back. And I should probably, there's a whole conversation that should be, a partner, a spouse, a confidant in some way is pretty vital, I feel like, in just this industry as a whole, of just having someone you can rely on. But that was a change. And so I changed into the digital media program at that time. And it was just that transition from like being what was called multimedia program to the digital media. So way back when, went to school there, did some cool things, moved to New York City, went to graduate school out there. And that was kind of the beginning of really expanding my network as well, and grew into doing a lot of different, so much different production work and things like that. And it actually kind of ties into kind of what I'm doing now. I mean, not kind of, but very much so, in the fact that being a professor, so I'm the technical title is Associate Division Director of Division of Creative Arts here at the University of St. Francis in Fort Wayne. where essentially I kind of oversee all the performing arts in the creative arts field. So I oversee the music tech program, the digital media program, and our dance program. And so, my graduate studies and things like that, my interest in academia there a little bit. But that was also my time in New York was where I got introduced to 80K microphones. And fast forward now being the president and owner of 80K microphones as of last year. That's kind of like how that all kind of came full circle in some fun ways.
Yeah, so you said something that actually was came up in conversation last week. We actually had Aubrey from Warm Audio, so Bryce's wife, to come and talk to us to give us a different perspective on this industry to see what it looked like from her perspective. Um, I've met your wife; she's a very nice woman. Was it hard for her to make all these transitions? I mean, I know your story. You've gone from Utah to New York to back to Utah to Mississippi to now Indiana. Has that been hard on her, or was she just completely all in and supportive the whole way?
So my wife is amazing and she's a fierce woman and is always up for an adventure. And yeah, when we moved in 2016 is when we moved to Fort Wayne, and this is what, going on year 9, which we've never lived anywhere that long. And at the time when we moved here, we had been married, what was that, 12 years, and it was our 11th move. So we together. And so for us, it was like, wow, the Midwest, we've never lived there. Let's do it. So she was all in. She's definitely the voice of reason, as far as talking me off a ledge and at times when I need that. But she's always been all in and just, yeah, I know it is not lost on me how fortunate I am and blessed in that regard to have somebody that's like, okay, let's do it, and purchasing a microphone company a year ago, that was something else where, there was, she was excited about it. And truth be told, I don't know if this is should be, I don't know, part of this conversation or not, but like she's an equal part in that.
Yeah.
It's the structure of the organization is set up that way because it was like, if we're going to do this together, we're going to go all in together and stuff. So she's always been up for an adventure. So that's just been a great support that I've had in making some of these, in some cases, some pretty drastic jumps.
Yeah, I think it's part of the conversation. We've got students that are brand new married, in the class, and they have different questions that I'm sure will come up, and they're, a little bit terrified, a little bit excited, a little bit of everything that we've been through all those emotions before. So I actually like peeling back some of the like layers and saying, this is a pretty normal process for you guys as a young married couple to have some of these fears, and it's totally understandable. What was the decision that took you guys out to New York? What made you decide to go out to NYU?
So I've toured through New York, again in bands and orchestra and all of that, and I've always loved New York City, and that always resonated with me. And for me, it was two things. One is I uh, I wanted to be out there, but I wanted to have a reason. And I know some people, it's like, hey, I'm going to move to Atlanta, or I'm going to go to LA or do the thing. And that wasn't that I didn't want to do that. It was I wanted a reason there, and I wanted to get my butt kicked, honestly. Like I wanted to be put in an environment that's like, uh, there's a lot of really good people, and if you can't do it, we can get somebody in here in 10 minutes. And I wanted that experience. I wanted to see how I held up. I wanted to grow. I wanted to be pushed in that way. And so what better environment than to do that? As opposed to just like loving, that we've had those conversations, Brian. That's just an environment that I love, and resonate. We joke all the time that I feel like, a lot of old people will go and retire in Florida, and we'll probably end up just in some small apartment in New York City, because that's just the kind of lifestyle that we enjoy, my wife and I.
Yeah, I know. For the students out there, Miles is he graduated just a little bit ahead of me out of this program, and so Miles a lot of times was my lifeline in having like somebody to answer questions because I'd be like, "How do you do this?" And I'd get the stare back like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Well, I know it's possible." And then usually somebody would say, "Well, call Miles." And so Miles was a student at NYU in a one bedroom studio, right? With
Yeah.
with your computer and your little recording rig set up kind of in the corner and like I almost want to say it was underneath something. I can't remember. It's been a while, but I could always rely on Miles getting me an answer some way or another to a question I had. So the thing I want to just say is number one, thank you for always being willing to field those questions at the time and still answering questions all the time for me. But number two, um, you guys sometimes got to get the idea out of your head that you're going to walk out of the university here and go into this big abundant field of having a lot. You're looking at a guy who's like totally inspirational to me and how you've just progressed through your career from these little tiny humble things to such great accomplishments. And I say that with you've got some really incredible accolades. um and so that's really awesome.
It's very kind and a little embarrassing.
Kind and embarrassing. No, dude, I think it's really it's a fun opportunity for people to see this expansion and growth. You left New York City and then you kind of meandered. I know you ended up here for a little while,
Yeah.
but you ended up in Mississippi. Can you talk about that story a little bit?
Yeah. So when I was in graduate school, I had a great mentor who passed away recently, and he was always like, "Oh man, you got to get an education," and I was like, "Absolutely not." But it's that thing of like you have so much energy, and I'm sure your students do as well. Like you have so much energy and passion for the thing, and so you just want to be surrounded by that. And I during my graduate study, I had some opportunity to do some workshops, and you get bit by that bug in teaching. And I was like, oh, actually, I really do want to do this. And so what ended up happening is we were in New York for a few years, and then we actually moved back to Utah. I was involved in a couple productions that brought me back, and I it was an interesting time. It was the market had crashed, and the thing that was so funny is it was just again, it's one of those things that you just kind of are guided on this path. And we moved back to Utah, and part of it was I had missed snowboarding, and I missed mountain biking and dirt biking. And so having not done that for a couple of years, and we had a new child, our oldest was born in New York. Like all of our children have been born in different states. And so we moved back, and so I was like, let's just do this. But I was going back to New York for almost 3 or 4 times a month for sessions. And it was the strangest time because the market had crashed. And so it was, it was one of those situations that it got to the point that I actually wouldn't let a lot of my friends know that I was going back to New York because, at first I'd like be couch surfing at these places while I was doing these sessions. And then it started to get kind of weird because they weren't getting calls for sessions, but I was. And then I'd have these gigs where I'd be flown in, I'd have a per diem, I'd be, all these kinds of things. And it was like, but it was the economy, just the economy took that hit. And so I didn't have that high overhead. I had so many friends that had studios and suites and things. And so I kind of went around that. And so after we moved to Utah, it was 3 years that I was traveling in and out of New York multiple times a month, which it got to the point of my wife and I were like, where do we live now? Because it got so strange. And so I was like, we need to get a place because this is getting weird. And so, so that was kind of my time. But part of it was too, is during that time, I got really excited about teaching, and I wanted to be able to have both of those things in my life. And I wanted to find a teaching position that supported my professional pursuits, but also would be a great environment for me to grow professionally as well as academically. And so during that time, I just kind of kept looking for what I thought would be the right fit. And so my first teaching position, I moved from Utah to Mississippi, to Cleveland, Mississippi, where I started teaching at Delta State University. And yeah, kind of that was kind of my being dropped in, but it's such an eclectic environment to be part of in the South. For those of you guitar players that are familiar with like the famed Robert Johnson selling his soul to the devil, like that, those crossroads were all right. Like the real crossroads, if you look up the crossroads, they'll tell you to go to Clarksdale, Mississippi. It's actually not it. They've just done a good job of the tourism. But the real off Dockery farms where Robert Johnson would literally get on the short line railroad right up 69 into Chicago and back, that was all there. So some of that historical, cultural things were so fun to be part of. And so that's kind of where my teaching and academic journey started after graduate school.
You were there for a couple of years, and then you got the position that ended up being your current position, which is I still don't even know how to explain what you're over so many things. It's a lot of fun, and it's always fun to share what's going on in the different world of academia with you. But before we jump into that boat, let's talk about the microphone company. You said that also came about as a relationship back in New York? How did
Yeah.
how did the conversation start where they're like, "Hey, you want to jump on with us?"
So the story is, so 80K microphones, my time in New York, I did a lot of work with Jazz at Lincoln Center, XM Sirius Satellite Radio, Wynton Marsalis. I did some films with Ken Burns during that time. And as an engineer, so I worked with the great producer Jeff Jones, who's done a lot of amazing jazz records, but he also did like early cool hip hop stuff like Public Enemy, and just he's a study in his own right. But I worked with him on so many records. And one day we had been working in I can't remember if this was in Avatar or well, now Power Station, now Berkeley, but or if it was in the halls there. But there was these microphones that were put up, and it must have been Jazz Lincoln Center. You know why it was? Because the thing that was interesting about Jazz Lincoln Center is the halls, the performance halls are union halls, but the studios are not union. So we would have input lists and we would bring out microphones, and then the union would be putting them according to our stage plots and everything like that. And so there'd be a little bit back and forth. So we kind of have, those were delicate relationships and them allowing you to actually get out and move some things. But what it was is because I didn't know the microphones that were being used. Those were just already predetermined, but I was engineering. And the founder had actually, I think must have been around AS time, because the founder was out there, but I was just kind of in the heat of mixing and doing a session while the producer was managing everything. And I remember something was said about this guy was coming in about these microphones, but I was too busy to really notice. But it was after this whole session had happened, then I was doing the pre-mixing. So I had the multi-tracks and I was getting them all prepped for the producer. And I called him, I said, man, these things sound awesome. Like, these are great tracks. What is this? And he's like, oh, I'm like, what is these microphones? This 80K. And he's like, that I had in the session notes. And he's like, oh, this is 80K. He's like, you should, oh man, they're amazing. And we just kind of went on and talked about that for me. He's like, you should call Larry, who's the founder of the company. And so I was like, yeah, I was like, I might want to get one of these. And so he's like, yeah. So he gave me Larry's contact. And I kid you not, I drafted this email that was like, I don't know if you remember me, but I was in the studio there. I was the engineer. We didn't get a chance to talk. I gave this whole long whatever. And I kid you. I mean, it was like I hit send and then my phone rang and he called me, and Larry's like, and we just talked about music and recording and for like 2 hours. And he was just so conscientious and was like, what are you doing? Like, what are the kinds of things I think you would like, this or this? And he wasn't trying to like be a pushy salesman. He was just trying to like figure out what is the best tool that you need. And he sent me some things. And me personally, I'm never somebody that wants to demo stuff. If I'm not able to buy it, I don't want to be a tire kicker. But he sent me some things, and he sent me more things than I could afford. But he's like, you just got to try this. Like, let's find out what's going to work for you. And that was the beginning of the relationship. And since that day, I've never done a session without their microphones out of personal choice. So fast forward, we've had a relationship and we talk and things like this, but it was a year ago, the company, or I guess almost 2 years ago now, they released their latest product, which was in their T-FET line, which is a FET microphone, but it was very cool and unique. And he said, you need to try this. Would you want to beta this? And I was like, sure. So he sent it to me, and I felt awful because it sat on my desk for like 3 months. I never used it because I wanted the time. You know, it is like, I want to like give somebody a real thorough review of this. And he would hit me every few weeks. Like, have you tried it? Have you tried it? What do you think? And I was like, I'll do it this weekend. And I just never got to it. Finally, I set up some sessions and I did, and I was blown away. It's like, man, this is amazing. He's like, you like that? I was like, yeah. He's like, you need to try a decatry of those. So I was like, okay. So he sent me a decatry to try. I loved them and I bought them. And then we just had this little bit of just this conversation about this microphone just over the course of 2-3 months. And then February of last year, he just sends me a message and he said, I'm looking for my next transition. And he wants to retire, and he's like, I'm discreetly but aggressively looking to sell the company. And I had no aspirations of ever doing such a thing, but he, I'll tell you, like, the personal moment of this. The fall before then, my wife and I, we'd been doing a bunch of renovations in our home. We'd been doing a bunch of flooring, and I, out of the blue, had this thought that crossed my mind that was like, and again, like this, I'm not doing anything audio related. I'm just listening to music and installing flooring. And the thought crosses my mind, man, I wonder if Larry's going to get close to selling 80K. That was just this thought that ran across my mind. And then it was gone. Like, I never thought about it again. And so when he reached out to me and shared that information with me, then the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I was like, huh, well, what are we talking? And so we came to an agreement, an arrangement, and we joke. I think he says he's semi-retired. I think he's very busy with the company now, but he works with me kind of in a mentoring capacity. But he also works on some designs and other things that we're doing within the company as we're looking to grow and those kinds of things. So yeah, it was something that just kind of came out of nowhere, but was built from a relationship 15 years prior.
Yeah, I think that story is fantastic because that's how a lot of things tend to work in this industry. You build a relationship, you're not really sure. Maybe like you don't talk to the person every single day. You talk every once in a while, but then all of a sudden somebody out of the blue is like, "Hey, I got this idea," or "Hey, I need your expertise," or "Hey, I can't do this right now. Are you free?" And then all of a sudden you've got this opportunity that just sparks out of nowhere. And I love how your whole story has just been this like constant, like, "Hey, I need you. Can you be here? Hey, can you fill this responsibility in this gap?" Um, if you had advice to students, which I mean, I know you do because you're educating all the time, but if you had advice to students on some basic keys for success in this career, what would you say?
There's so much good advice out there. I don't know that I have anything that is really unique to me, but I think following your gut is so important. I think, speaking from, working in audio and music and post, our whole job is exploiting feelings. It's like, how can I make you feel that emotion even deeper? And we're master manipulators. And I think within that, we develop a really strong sense of instinct, gut reaction, inspiration, however you want to define it. And I think that's really important because it's not an easy road, but I think that there's so many different paths that intersect, that learning how you react to that type of inspiration is important. Whether it's, should the chorus bump a little bit more here, or is it a matter of, is this a client that I just want to stay away from? And I think there's so many things that I feel like interfere with that. There's so many processes or rules or this or that or expectations that fly in the face of that. and it's hard, and it can be lonely at times. And I actually, man, it was so touching. Uh, the former president of SSL, Pierce, and Don Wershba, who's the VP, I got to know them when I was in Mississippi. We purchased a duality because yeah, you guys have a duality. So we purchased a duality, and I got to know them, and have carried on a relationship over the years. And when the news broke of this transition with ADK microphones, I was concerned. So ADK microphones has been around 25 years. This year 26. And that has a very strong, it's just a fierce community of people that are huge fans of, of the company and the microphone and the service and all these kinds of things. And it's always been about the music or the resource, the recording. I didn't want, there's so many acquisitions and mergers in pro audio. I was so scared that people would see like, oh, somebody new bought this. And so, because there was a press release that was going to go out that was going to specifically identify that it was purchased. And I was like, no, let's not do that, not to be shady, but I didn't want people to think, you don't have to look too far, and you can see that these things that have happened in pro audio that didn't benefit the product or the consumer well. It just was a bottom line decision.
Right.
And so I was very concerned about that. And so for the first, when that kind of went out, it was just kind of my appointment as CEO and president, but it was, not to really say the owner. And again, I don't even know that I feel that way. I've got such a good support team and everything like this. But what ended up happening was, again, it's that idea of support out of the blue. Pierce, who had retired, both he and Don had retired from SSL. He calls me and he just says, wow, congratulations. This is so exciting to see. And he said something, he said, I want you to know that if you ever need to call someone, I know how lonely it can be. He's like, just call me. And that meant so much to me, because I don't think it necessarily matters whether you're in a company or whatever your role is, but I just feel like in the creative world, you have those moments of just, it can be lonely. And that's when it can be really hard to try to determine, should I follow my gut reaction or my instincts here? And so that has always meant a lot to me.
Awesome. Yeah, relationships are so important in this industry, and that's if I'm telling my students that are listening right now, watching, you got to build relationships in this industry. Miles brought up something that I feel really uh attached and important, is to attend things like AES. There's also NAM. I unfortunately won't be going to AES this year because I've spent the last I spent 2 weeks in Bolivia, and so I can't really miss much more school. But what are some of the connections that you have found in conventions like AES, and how have those helped you expand your network?
Wow, great question. Yeah, I hope Bolivia was awesome. I love Bolivia.
Have you been there?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's cool. I didn't know that.
yeah. So, it's that idea of networking, and everybody says relationships and networking is important, and it's absolutely true. I hate the term networking because it feels a little bit of feels a little skeevy sometimes. Yes, I think those things are critical. I think being part of a community is important. And there's lots of different ways, whether that's virtually or physically or whatever. I think the problem is, we all want to make a living. We have aspirations or objectives. But those steps are required to develop those relationships. Like I said, and many of them may not materialize for years. And you have to know that going in, like, I'm just laying the groundwork. This is just reconnaissance. This is research. This is all of these kinds of things. But those being involved, you start to know, you're never, it's so easy to go to this thing like, I'm going to look for an internship, and you just try to bang it out. And you're sometimes maybe you come out a little too strong on that first date, but it's important to build those and just start that groundwork, and to be that person like, oh, I remember you, or, oh, yeah, it's just, It's just, it's an organic process, but you have to put yourself in those positions to do it. In all parts of the community, again, whether that's physically or virtually. But I think, there's a lot of, there's just, people want to work with people that they enjoy. That's what makes great engineers and great producers, and being amicable and working in those environments and being fun and being able to ease tension, and not all of those things that I know you teach, Brian, and the students here. It's just, it's as simple as that. And it's also just a matter of like staying the course. And sometimes you have to deviate from those paths to make, whether that's to make ends meet, or that's not, there's no shame in that. But you're still trying to move forward in some way. But none of this happens, in an isolated situation. And, those things that look like huge overnight successes never are. And if they are, they will be for a hot minute, and then that's over and everyone forgets about it. So, everybody wants a career, everybody wants to enjoy what they're making. And so that's just where those things happen. And, these networks are important. Brian, I know that, there's former classmates that you went to school with, or things like that. Like, I've got a project, this isn't right for me, maybe this is for you, or, I mean, I can speak at length about that, but you've got to put yourself in those positions in some way. And my argument for that is when people say, I can't find jobs, or I can't find the opportunities, and it's like, well, have you looked here? Have you done this? Have you done, and the answer is like, no, not really. I haven't. Nah, it's like, well, you've got to do it. And now's the perfect time, because you have like the get out of jail free card, right? It's like, I'm a student, ... And everybody's like, cool, I'll talk to you,
Right.
So even if it's not like a position or a job or an intern, but it's like how many people you can get a conversation with or an audience because you're a student. It's incredible.
Yeah. There's something to be said. You and I have both helped out the MOGs at, at NAM, and we get students that come up to us and they're just like, "Hey, I'm a student," and they're like, they have this eagerness just to like know, and like I've only seen this thing in a plugin. I can't believe I actually get to touch it, and there's such an excitement that brews and develops. And so my students, you guys, and I know Miles students, you guys are spoiled because you guys have a lot of toys to play with in our different various studios. And so, but there are those that out there that don't get these opportunities, and you can always tell how excited a student is when they come up to you and say, "Hey, teach me, because this is my first chance actually seeing this product in real life." And it's not just the products. You get to meet really cool people. Really cool people come up to you, people that I didn't think I'd ever be teaching how to use a compressor or an EQ, coming up to me saying, "How to use this thing?" And I'm like, that's what I'm supposed to be asking you, not the other way around. So
Yeah.
that's what I find really fascinating about these conferences and conventions. Because these classes fly by, and I can't believe that we've already flown this much time through this conversation. I'm going to turn the time over to my students if they have any questions. I believe Tanner's in there and can help out. There is a funky delay, so we'll have the question asked, put it on mute, and then we'll have the call and answer. And I know, Whitney, you've got the first question, right? It's sitting there. You're just sitting there with it right on the tip of your tongue. He's shaking his head. Yeah, but anyways, to my students, please feel free to ask some questions.
Can I just talk, or
Yeah.
do I have to stand up?
Can you hear him from over there?
Can you hear me?
We can hear
Yeah.
you, but let's see you come over a little bit into the camera.
This is the camera right here.
Okay. Hello.
You're scoot back.
Hi.
And down.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm squatting a little bit. My question is, so you kind of offhandedly mentioned that there was a time where you were getting lots of calls and your friends were not getting calls. I want to know what you think gave you that edge to where you were the one getting the calls where other people weren't when it was a difficult time.
Ooh, one is some of it was relationships I already had. I think it's two things. One is I think it was I love working in the studio. You know, I mean, like my life consists of I get to teach students about the things that I love. I get to do the things that I love. And I think that that rubs off on the clients, you know, when we're making a record, or, you know, we're working in any capacity that way. And so I think that, you know, just having those relationships allowed that when we had worked together, or it was a recommendation, when it was somebody to say, I've worked with this person and we had a great experience, or it was, you know, we're doing a more recording, you know, as opposed to being like, well, I could go get, I mean, it was New York City. So, I mean, there's plenty of engineers out there, great engineers out there. Probably better engineers than me, you know, I mean, I'm certain of that, you know, there's lots of them, but but just that dynamic of being able to work together and understand people's visions and all of that. I think that that's what worked. And I was in a situation where I was pretty flexible. Like my whole career has always been being very flexible, and I've traveled a lot, and part of that allowed me that you know, when the market crashed, and at some point when you have so much overhead, you can't go below. And I wasn't trying to I wasn't lowballing anybody. My rates stayed the exact same through all of that. But it was just one of those things, I think, is people were trying to clamor for these things. I was kind of stable, you know, and it wasn't like studios that were trying to like ramrod a bunch of sessions because they were so discounted rates. And then they had to kind of make up for that with the quantity that they were doing. And then it didn't allow people to have the time that they might have wanted to have. You know, there was a lot of complex things associated with that. But I think that ultimately it was just some of those relationships, but also the work that we had created in the past that either was recommended, or, you know, doing a second round or more of the same, you know, those types of projects.
There's a secret that I learned from a guy named Gene Simmons. And he said, people hire people that they like. Learn people skills. Because people skills, in fact, I think if I remember right, he said, it doesn't matter who better knows how to turn the knob or push the fader. It's the guy that you like in the studio that works well with you is the one that you're going to call. So learn people skills. And that's what Miles said. They're going to call the person who has the people skills, who you like to work with. But it's a good question. And so thanks for that, Walker. Anybody else got a question that we can fire off at Miles while we've got him here? Couple crickets, and that's okay.
You just like sit down with the chair.
Oh, there you go. Whitney had a question too. I just assumed it was earlier. So there you go.
I had to think of how to word it, I guess. So it sounds like pretty quickly after attending UVU, you moved to New York. Sounds like to do some graduate school there, and then ended up working there for quite a while. But then later you came back to Utah, and you mentioned it might have been because of some of your hobbies, but I was curious, did you ever consider working in Utah, trying to do like studio work in Utah? And if that wasn't really an option for you, I guess I'm kind of wondering if that seemed like a viable option for you, or maybe if the industry didn't seem big enough here for you.
That's a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that. So I'm thinking of my thoughts about that. That's great. I'm a pretty big optimist. And I'm pretty turned off by the pessimism that can exist in this industry. And also some of the, you know, there are some shady things that happen and you encounter and all of that. But, you know, you can't get any more rural than where I was in Mississippi. And there's definitely opportunities everywhere. I think I never looked at like the Utah wasn't the right place for me. It was just I kind of have wanderlust, and I wanted to have a big city experience, and that was the attraction there. And it was that before any of this was even in my purview. Again, just as a musician, as a touring and traveling musician, I was like, man, I could live here. And so that was always just kind of in the back of my mind. I haven't worked, in New York, or I'm sorry, in Utah for some time, but all my time while I was a student in the digital media program and all that, it's probably like similar to many of you trying to freelance and do that thing and being accessible and all of that. I think the thing that is both advantageous and a disadvantage for students is that you have so much at your disposal, whether it's, if you're working on your laptop and all the amount of work you can just do. I mean, let's face it, you don't have to work in a proper, what we would consider a studio environment to do a lot of things today. But the disadvantage of that is I think that it can develop really sloppy workflows. And that shows when you have to collaborate with other people. And when it's a matter of like, oh, this is not, as soon as somebody sees that we're operating at a different level, then they immediately know, oh, it's one of these. And so that I think is the thing that is the differentiator, no matter where you work, that no matter what it is, people don't know if you were in a hotel one night and you did the work, or you did it in your home or a big studio, but like that differentiator is can you hang on the workflow that needs to happen? And so I think no matter where you are, whether again, like a really rural environment, figuring out what that looks like for you, I think that there's opportunities there to maximize and monetize that in a career way. But it requires, it's easy to say I can do the thing and I know the thing, but does that plug into somebody else that's going to run a bigger operation? Because ultimately that's what you're going to need to do to grow your business.
A good question and a great answer.
Yeah.
Miles, my last question that I'm going to field to you, because I feel that you've watched my life go in and out of balance. You've always had a good balance of maintaining your work life balance. And how do you maintain that in this career field?
Well, I think, Brian, you're an inspiration in many levels. So your students are lucky to have you, as is the institutions. So I need to say that. Man, you guys, work-life balance is a mess. And it's so hard. I have a personal problem with, some of you might aspire to work in some of these big studio environments, and that your first experience is going to be being a runner and getting coffee or doing those things. And I think that that's a complete understandable situation when you're dealing with creative people and high emotions, and you don't want to drop somebody into an environment that already might be a little touchy and that they don't know, and then some interns acting like they know what's going on. And we all have horror stories of those kinds of things happening. But so that's a natural thing. I have a real problem with people that don't value the commodity that students are, in the sense that students, it's such a funny environment because nowhere else, here are students that are investing in themselves, they're investing in their careers, they're applying themselves, they're learning as hard as they can to go work with a team that is going to tell them, well, we're going to put you through the paces first. Now, a little bit of training and understanding makes sense, but this idea of, I've seen interns at some big studios that have been interns for a year and a half with like, well, I'm hoping to kind of get my chance to be in the room kind of thing. And that's bogus. The fact that, I would love to be like, you know how to pocket something? Great. I want you to pocket this while I'm doing this other thing. And I've never understood why that that is not seen in a professional sense. Like nowhere else is it going to be a matter of like, let's bring somebody on, but let's not like work them and do things. It's so bizarre to me that we find that in the entertainment industry. So with that, it really makes that work-life balance hard because, everybody's grinding away at the studio at all hours and all those kinds of things. And again, everybody's different, and some people operate in a very normal capacity as a human with 4 hours of sleep. I don't, and my family would tell you I don't. But you need to figure out what works for you, and it's always going to be, it's kind of touch and go, and you have to figure out what works for you. And some people work very strange hours, but it works for them, and that's where again, like that support, whether it's like I say, a spouse, a friend, a dog, I don't know, but somebody that can give you some feedback and help kind of keep things in check is important. And it's not always an easy conversation. That can be kind of hard at times, but it can, it's important to have those things. And so I don't know that I have a particular recipe, but I can tell you, I have my wife who's amazing and we talk all the time. And so she's that rock and support, but I also have a very close friend in New York that's that person that I can send a mix to, but I don't have to say, please don't share this with anybody, that kind of a thing, that he can tell me right out as like, man, that's not right. Or, that's kind of weird. And he can be very open. And I think having a few people in your life that can do that, in whether it's your personal life, your professional career, it just helps keep things on track. And I think not alienating those people in the pursuits of these kinds of things.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just gonna say to you, to people out there, I watch you. You take care of your health. That's an important thing that you do. I watch you also know when to push and when to pull back. And I've seen that with your family. I've seen that with like what you do. But you guys, one of the cool things I think about Miles is because he's an educator, when it comes time to summertime, he plays really hard with his family. And so they get the time with the dad version of Miles and the husband version of Miles. And sometimes you'll see Miles out there being just a brother and he goes off on these adventures with his brothers. And as you guys work hard and establish good, healthy habits, you can still do the things that you love and enjoy. And just my perspective is, as you're a great shining example of somebody who is the person who can play the hardest but also work the hardest. And so that's why I asked that question. And you've always, like I said at the beginning, you've always been somebody I look up to, a mentor, friend, and somebody who is traveling along this journey with me. And I know same thing, I can call you and say, dude, I'm having a problem with something at work. Can you help me out? Or can you just listen and give me perspective? And I've always appreciated that. I've always appreciated that you represent this university so well in your professional career, and that you are somebody for all of us to look up to and to, have aspirations of being able to live a really cool, neat career life beyond UVU. So thank you so much for your time, for being here, and for everything that you offer to us and in this capacity. So
I appreciate that. I'm happy to do it. And just to book in that a little bit with the question about like, why was I getting the calls when other people weren't? I know I can work harder than a lot of people, but that doesn't mean I'm working 24 hours a day. It means that when I'm doing the thing, I'm really hyper focused on that. And I think that that's some of the reasons why I get the call, because I can work really, really hard and then we'll play hard. And that does, again, I don't want that to be confused with like, I work 24, because you have to take care of yourself. That this industry doesn't necessarily promote that very well, but you need to. And if you, for any sort of amount of longevity. So, but anyways, all that to say, I'm happy to do it. And I'm available. Students have other questions or anything like that, please don't hesitate to reach out. Give me email, call, text, whatever.
yeah, thank you guys again. It's Miles Fulwider from live from Fort Wayne, Indiana, here
Fort
at
Wayne.
Fort Wayne, Indiana, here at Utah Valley University, alumni and person who's leading the charge in the audio industry. And thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good weekend.
You too.